there is a lot of fear in the world right now, particularly so. Obviously, there was a lot 2 years ago, and it's a different kind of fear that we're dealing with right now. So I invite you to think about our responsibility to know the difference between process and content, first of all. So that means what people are fearful of, what people talk about, the stories, the narrative, how they create their dramas, how they create their fears. Through the happy brain model, I would always say, okay, is that fear useful? So, first of all, is there a real threat? If you had a hurricane warning, then that all of the fear that you could muster would be very important to your survival. So that would be a useful fear. If you're walking down the high street and a car comes careering towards you, you need your fear to help your body to take action, to leap out of the way, to find safety. That's a good fear. That's a useful fear, and it produces the chemistry and electricity in your body to take an action. But what we have a lot of at the moment is people lie in bed and metaphorically they're thinking there is a hurricane coming. There's no evidence of a hurricane, but what if it did come? I think it might come. How would my family survive? How would my garden fence survive? What about my dogs? What about my neighbours? What would happen in the hurricane? And so the imagination, which, as you know, creates exactly the same neurochemical response inside the brain to produce all of the electrochemical energy you require to take an action. And then you lie in bed, and that energy can't be discharged. So it cycles round and round and round and round. So I think we have a responsibility to be aware of the difference between threat that can be witnessed by others and threat that is coming from the inner world and threat that is carried on the social narrative. One thing we can do is to keep ourselves clear about what kind of fears are being raised. And if we get into a fearful state, fearful thoughts, fearful feelings, fearful neurological, physiological responses, then there are quick and easy things we can do. You know, we get ourselves into a state of balance, we focus on breathing, the long out breath, switching on the parasympathetic system so that we can get into a state of calm. So we clear ourselves. When the snow globe gets all a bit full, we just let everything calm down so we can see clearly through it. And sometimes we have to use our clarity of mind to see beyond the very thing that is creating the perceived threat, the thing that we're afraid of. So we have to look to the other side of that. Seeing where we are going. In NLP, we talk about a well-formed outcome. It's kind of the thing you do in day one on an NLP practitioner training or thereabouts. And then somehow, in my many years of NLP experience, it seems to be forgotten, and yet it has to be there all the time. What are you aiming your brain towards? What are you aiming your consciousness towards? So if you're aiming your consciousness towards the threat, if you're aiming your consciousness towards the social media narrative that's driving fear, you're no longer driving your brain. Unless it's important, and that's always the caveat. Make sure that you sometimes we have to turn around and face fear in the face. Face fear in the face. That's interesting. But so, where are you aiming your brain towards? What are you focused on? What is the bigger picture? What's beyond that? And in timeline use, one of the simplest ways that I find is to take ourselves, and I'm now going to bring in our responsibility of driving other people's brains in parallel, idea in Taoist tradition that we can live for 120 years, should we live in the flow of the Tao. I'm not sure how many of us actually truly stay in the flow of the Tao, but it's a nice ambition. So let's, and I would do this with a client, let's visit that 120-year-old version of yourself. What, when you arrive there, what does, and assume, and this is important to the next chunk of information, let's make that assumption that you've lived a fulfilling, contented life, and you arrive not quite at the pearly gates, but you're at that 120-year mark, having lived a fulfilling life. And of course, when you look back through times, there were highs and lows and twists and turns, but you stood in what we call resilience, that whatever happened, and the number of times you may have fallen down, you reorientated yourself and got back up again, and you learned the great lessons that to bring you to this place of having lived a fulfilling life. Now, we don't know the details, but we get the feelings, the emotional state of what that will feel like being there. And as you step into this place now of being in this version of you, what are you most grateful for? What are you most delighted about? And what will you thank the current version of yourself for having done? So you begin a dialogue with another part of you, which there are a few loops in here for those who are tracking, but the question is, which dialogue are you listening to? Because sometimes we have to create a new dialogue, and having a dialogue with the older version of you talking to the current version of you, what is he or she going to say? Thanks. Thanks for doing that. Thanks for focusing on that. Thanks for doing that differently. So that sets up a strong resource. Now, as coaches and helpers, we know that we often, should I say, encourage our clients to think ahead. Oh, let's go to, where's your 10-year plan? What's your, 18-month plan? What's your 5-year, 10-year, 20-year, whatever? But sometimes just really stretching out to a meta position can be very resourceful. So coming back into the present time and looking through all of time, when you see that big picture out there of yourself smiling and beckoning you forward, you have something else to focus your attention on when things get difficult. So I think that's an important thing. And I suppose the bit that then brings us into, and I said before about making an assumption about having lived a fulfilling and contented life, we're going to focus on the word presupposition in the language, which is going to help us to get there and help us to help other people to get there. Now that brings me into the aspect of your question, which was about children. What are the presuppositions that the children are being bombarded with? And they're quite shocking if you just stop and look at them. The presuppositions that the children, in fact, I wrote an article about this late last year. I think it's on LinkedIn, actually. And, what are the presuppositions that the children are living through? The presuppositions are that because they were homeschooled, they're not going to get good grades. Because they can't see their friends, they're going to get addicted to screen time. Because we hear these dreadful, hypnotic. Well, they're more than hypnotic. we have a term which I use interchangeably. It's really bad hypnosis, but on the other hand, it's really damn good hypnosis because it works. So the judgment is that it's bad, but the process of getting into somebody's brain is it's a very successful way. So we have a responsibility to listen out for the presuppositions that are being made and helping ourselves, our clients, our colleagues, and our children to stretch their awareness beyond those presuppositions. And we can do it cleverly. We can say things like, you know what, it's pretty likely that because you've been homeschooled, you're going to have a more calmer approach to managing your studies. You look at your NLP framework and you look at how we would use Milton language patterns to create cause and effect or complex equivalence, any of the Milton model language patterns, and we use them deliberately to aim the other fearful people towards the opposite almost of what they're being told to be afraid of. So but think about presuppositions are just the most powerful language pattern of all. What is being presupposed by you when you are talking to them? Said before she was about to put her children to bed. I think bedtime is such a delicious moment to practice every skill in your NLP book, because the number of children who never get I feel really, it is more than juicy, it's glorious. They never get this rich opportunity to have a parent say, so I wonder what you'll dream about tonight. How many wonderful dreams you'll have. I wonder how snuggly you'll be under the covers tonight. I wonder whether your pillow is going to feel softer on your left ear or your right ear. There are endless opportunities for us to run those presuppositions, using bedtime as an example. So thinking creatively about looking beyond fears is my suggestion for you. I hope that answers some of your query.